6 years ago, I took my first discipleship group over to listen to a chastity speaker. And the speaker was great, talked really, helped the guys to understand just the beauty of what God created sex for and all that. And afterwards, we sat down and we were visiting and asked the guys what they remembered. And two of the guys said it so well. One said, "Not all sex is bad." And I was like, that's an interesting statement. And the other one said, "Not all sex is good." And I was like, oh, this is good. There's a good nuance there. And I think it brings up the question, why growing up do we sometimes internalize the message that somehow sex is bad? And I think part of it is in encouraging the virtue of chastity, it's difficult to communicate that, hey, this is good, but in the right context. Because we'll all desire the pleasure of sexual activity, but it's a question of how do I order that correctly? And so what I like to do is I like to compare sex to fire. Okay. So over the last few days, it's been really cold. How many of you have a fireplace at home and you guys have had the fireplace up and going, right? Okay. And it feels good, right? It keeps you warm. It comforts you. Sometimes if you have a real fireplace and at the end of the night, you're watching the coals, the crackling, how it just does all that. It's very relaxing and peaceful. Now, let's compare that to about 15 years ago, my family, we had a bunch of stuff in storage over by the bus garage by Culver's there in that storage unit. And a guy broke into the unit next to ours because he was looking to steal some stuff to sell to buy some drugs. And he thought that he had dropped something accidentally that would incriminate him. So he decided to burn that particular storage unit. And it was the one right next to ours. And we had a ton of personal stuff from our just family photos and all kinds of stuff. And it was really, really sad to lose all that stuff. Well, so what is the difference between the fire in the fireplace and the fire that burned down and destroyed a lot of my family's memory? A big part of it is the right context. Okay. When we have fire in our fireplace, when it's controlled, when it's ordered to keep us warm, fire is ordered to cook our food, to help run furnaces and all that kind of stuff, fire is good. But at the same time, fire can also be incredibly destructive. Okay. Just like with my, all the stuff that we had in storage. I actually worked with a guy one time when he was a young kid. He reached up on the stove and hit something and stuff fell on him. And he was, even as an adult, as like a 50-year-old guy, he was scarred from an accident with fire. Okay. And I think that's such a good analogy to say that's a lot how sex is. That in the right context, in marriage between a husband and a wife, it's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing. But the challenge is we all will be tempted to be able to use our sexuality in ways that it wasn't meant for. And what helps us then to order that is the virtue of chastity. And chastity is, we've been given this gift and we use it correctly. Just like fire is designed to be used in a fireplace, on a stove, or in a furnace. And so that's kind of the first place I want to start, is just by referencing that. And so what we're going to do in this course is we're going to go through 3 fundamentals. They are learning to master temptation or to manage temptation, learning to respond to urges or cravings, and then the third one is learning to cooperate with God's grace. And as I said, tonight we'll do the first one. Next month on Open D Group Night, we'll do the second one, learning to respond to urges and cravings. And then in April, we'll do learning to cooperate with God's grace. So let's start here. I'll reference a few things in here in the book. If you want to flip to page 3, there's a quote from the Catechism that I'd like to to start with, because I think this is important, particularly when it comes to the virtue of chastity. And at the bottom of page 3, there's the paragraph that's indented on the bottom. It says, self-mastery is a longing in exacting work. So self-mastery is one of the ways that we refer to living out the virtue of chastity. Self-mastery is that, you know what, I have desires, I've been given something good, but I master myself in terms of where I direct that and how I use it. So chastity is often referred to as self-mastery. Is a long and exacting work. One can never consider it acquired once and for all. Now that's interesting. So in the group here, we got a lot of leaders, okay? All ages, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, maybe even 60s. You don't have to identify yourself if you're in your 60s. But I think all of them would say that chastity requires them to be intentional and to put effort in to live out that self-mastery, no matter what decade of life they are in. And so it says, one can never consider it acquired once and for all. It presupposes renewed effort at all stages of life. The effort required can be more intense in certain periods, such as during childhood and adolescence. And I think that's why when Father led us in prayer, he said, you know, it's so good that we're here, because this is a time that it's good for us to learn to understand this. Why did God give us our sexual desires? What is it meant to be ordered for? What do we want to do to avoid falling into sin, particularly habitual sin? Because it's so easy. And I know for myself, I didn't have someone there to help me. And so my goal with this course is to help you be able to understand those fundamentals that will help you. All right. So on page 4, we're going to look this month at managing temptations. And there's 2 ways that we experience the desire to use our sexuality in ways that God didn't intend it for. The first I describe as a temptation. The second is an urge. Now here's the difference, okay? How many of you have given up something like sweets for Lent? Okay, given up dessert, sweets. Okay, so you've made a decision during Lent, I'm not going to eat sweets, my desserts, whatever, all right? And you are over at a friend's house during Lent, and they say, do you want a cookie? Do you want some M&Ms? Do you want some ice cream, right? Them saying that is at that point of temptations. Temptations come to us through our senses: sight, sound, taste, touch, okay? Those are the ways that we experience temptations primarily. So when they say, do you want ice cream? And it's like, oh no, I gave it up for Lent, okay? You are tempted though to say, maybe just this one time, right? Okay, that's a temptation. Now an urge or a craving is different. An urge could be you're just sitting by yourself, just kind of bored, not doing anything. There's nothing around you to tempt you. But because you're bored, you're like, oh, I'm bored. I would love to have like some ice cream or something. All right. It's a craving that we have. Cravings come because we want to offset a discomfort. We want to feel better. Maybe that's just our habit of what we do to feel better. Does that distinction make sense? Temptations through our senses, urges, cravings come to us, not because it's in front of us, but because we have this inward desire to do something to feel better. All right. So as we look then at how do we manage temptations, okay? And what you'll see is temptations are managed, urges are responded to. Okay, we'll talk about responding next time, but I want to start by looking at your brain. So, okay, let's pretend that this is your brain, right? We all know yours is bigger, okay? But your brain, if this is your brain and this is the brain stem, and this would be the brain, this little piece right here is the limbic system. It's responsible for fight, flight, and freeze, okay? And then this is the part that starts growing. It's your upper brain. This is the part that starts growing around age 11 or 12, okay? A few differences about these different parts of the brain, all right? What's cool, do you notice that as you've gotten older, you can focus longer on stuff? If you have like little brothers, younger kids you end up spending a lot of time around, and they're just crazy and everywhere, right? Part of it is their brain hasn't matured as much as yours has. Okay. And so one of the important things that we can do to be able to manage temptations is engage what's called the higher brain, that prefrontal cortex that's developing, versus the limbic system that's underneath here. And I want to go through a few ways that we can do that. All right. And the first is on page 9, at the top of page 9 is the act of contrition prayer. Okay. And so I'll have you flip to that. Let's just look at that act of contrition together. The last line there says, I firmly resolve with the help of your grace to sin no more and to avoid the near occasions of sin. So part of what we want to do is we want to start to be conscious of when we are tempted to sin. Now, hopefully we're not dealing with sexual temptation, right? The reality is that at least some of us are, okay? If you're not, good. Don't go find it, all right? This will help with any type of temptation, any type of sin that you're looking to overcome, all right? But the first step is to, when we recognize sin that we want to get over, we want to learn to recognize our near occasion, okay? So what does that mean, all right? Might surprise you as you look at me, but I've been overweight most of my life, okay? All right? Thank you to those 2 people that laughed. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. So I've gone on many diets over the course of my life. When you go on a diet, and for me, I can't eat sweets, which is one of my favorite things, ice cream in particular, all right? So what do? Well, I know that if I have ice cream in my house, I'm going to be tempted to have ice cream, right? So what do? I get rid of it all. Because I know it's not that eating ice cream is sinful, but it's a really good comparison to my near occasion of sin. I have to get those things out of my life. And that's what it is to identify your near occasions of sin, okay? On page 10, next to the picture of the swimming pool there. This is a great distinction that John O., who most of you probably remember, the previous youth minister, the paragraph says, important distinction. There is a difference between noting the attractiveness of a woman and lusting after her, okay? John would say that a simple rule of thumb is if you look more than once, you are likely to focus on just her sexual aspects and likely to move towards lust. It's not sinful to notice that a woman is attractive. We're designed to do that as guys. But what we don't want to do, what lust is that indulging just in her sexual aspects, just to kind of take it in and use her from a mental standpoint to make ourselves feel better. And so again, it's always good because as we go through this, it can be confusing. It's like, oh my gosh, she's beautiful. I can't look at her. And it's like, well, you notice her, just move on now, right? So that's a big piece. And so on page 11, what I do is I list a number of the ways that we can encounter near occasions of sin. And there's 4 of them listed. The first is places. So when you go to confession with Father and you get done and you don't want to engage in whatever sin it was before, one of the things you can look at, where were the places I was tempted to sin? What were the places? And those become things that now we want to make a plan to. I either have to manage how I engage with those places, or maybe I don't go there anymore, right? Times of day or week, okay? Particularly with sexual sin, our willpower tends to weaken and run out later into the evening. And so a lot of times guys will hit a point where, you know what, I can't have my cell phone in my bedroom by myself, right? It's not good for me. I can't do it. Okay. That's a time of day or a place. People I'm around. I would never have done this, but when I was a junior in high school, I was working at a gas station, and back in the day, okay, the old people will appreciate this. We had cassettes, CDs, and there was a band that I really liked. And the gal was like, whoa, here. It was late at night. It was just the two of us working. She's like, here, take it. And I'm like, well, no. And she's like, oh, no, I don't know. All right. So here I'm a junior in high school. I took this cassette. All right. Went to confession, did all that. So I'm good. But it was somebody I was around it was tempting me to do something that I wouldn't normally do. And then the last one, activities. Are there certain activities? I talked about cell phones are tough, right? Social media, those are all things that can easily lead us towards sexual temptation. And so what kind of boundaries and limits should we put in place? Okay. All right. So when we are tempted, what do we do? On page 12, you see the cool little picture of the devil tempting Jesus. I don't know if you know this, the first Sunday of Lent every year, it's the gospel is the story of Jesus being tempted by the devil. And I find it so fascinating. A couple pieces. One, how did Jesus respond? Jesus responded to the temptations from the devil with the truth. All right. If we look on page 12, it says, Satan says to him, if you are the Son of God, command this stone to become bread. And Jesus says, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone. So the devil took him up and showed him all the kingdoms. And Satan said, to you I will give all this authority and their glory, for it has been delivered to me. And I give it to whom I will. If you will then worship me, it will be all yours. And Jesus says, it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. And then a third temptation. So how did Jesus respond? He responded to the temptation with the truth. Okay. So what has to happen? First, we have to know the truth. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then we have to understand how to do it. Before we move on, though, I'll point out the very last line there, right above where it says the power of truth. It says, that paragraph, it concludes with, and when the devil had ended every temptation, he departed from him until an opportune time. Note the devil only stopped for a while because he would be back to try and tempt him again. Now, as we get better at managing these temptations, the devil won't be around as long and we'll be able to bounce back through them faster. But that's an important thing to understand, that even Jesus was tempted. So what is the truth of our sexuality? And if we look at what the church teaches and the catechism, I want to go through on the top of page 13 here, just a few things that are good for us to keep in mind. Again, the first bullet point, God created sex to be good for a husband and a wife to enjoy together. It's beautiful, but God created it to be good for a husband and a wife. Sex between a husband and a wife was created to help them form an intimate emotional bond and to create children. So what is it ordered for? Jason Everett says sex is designed for babies and bonding. It helps husband and wives feel closer together. The challenge, I talked about this at the high school night last month. The challenge is, will we trust God's plan and wait until we're married, right? And that's one of the challenges. Husbands and wives model God's love through their sexual union and the creation of life. We as husbands and wives, if you're called to marriage, if you're blessed to be able to have children, you image God in your ability to create life. It's so cool. The feelings of sexual desire we experience are intended to motivate us to learn to love women and seek an intimate, exclusive, indissoluble relationship in marriage. So sex is meant to motivate us, but we have to orient it just like we would a fire in a fireplace. Love is willing the good of the other person for their sake. So one of the temptations we'll have as you start dating is the temptation to just physically use a woman or girl, right? And is that loving her for her sake, or is it just us trying to get something from her? And so that's part of me loving her means that I do what's best for her. Our single years are meant to prepare us for when we meet our future spouse. The person we are dating now may be someone else's future spouse. Stop and think about that. If your best friend is dating your future wife right now, you don't know you're going to get married, but what if that's your future wife? How would you want him to treat her? If you're dating someone right now, or the next person you date, it might be someone else's wife. Okay. We can love our future spouse now by praying for them before we even meet for them. I was challenged when I was in college by someone to start praying for my wife. I had not met Cindy. It would be another probably 6, 7, 8 years before we met. But it's interesting, in praying for her, we got to know each other and we were dating, and we went back and we looked at some of the times that were really difficult for her. Those were some of the times that I was very intentionally praying for my future wife. Okay. And what was neat, whereas what porn does, what sexual sin does, is it orients us to use the other person and just take from them and be selfish. Praying for our future spouse is an act of love before we even meet that person. Yeah. And the last one, chastity of mind and heart, means we respect the dignity of women by looking them with love and respect. So how would that look like, responding to sexual temptations with the truth? What that would mean then is a simple prayer like this: Lord, thank you for creating me to be attracted to women. Sexual attraction reminds me that I'm created to love a spouse. Please bless this person, bless my future spouse, and help me to learn to love everyone well. So just a practical example of how to do that. A couple more and then we'll have you break for small group. On page 15, there's a picture of an Amish farmer. I don't know if there's many Amish people around here. I grew up, Staples, Motley is where I grew up. And there are large Amish communities there. And imagine they still do all their farming, build stuff, all that kind of stuff using horses. It's really kind of amazing. And I was reading one time and I made the assumption, like a typical horse could maybe pull 1,000 pounds of something. And you would think that because a lot of times they'll have a couple horses pulling stuff, that, well, does that mean 2 horses together can pull 2,000 pounds? And the reality is that 2 well-trained horses working together actually can pull almost twice as much as they could by themselves. Okay, so instead of 1,000 and 1,000, meaning 2,000 pounds, they can actually pull 3,000 or 4,000 pounds when they pull together. There's an element that if we have people on a team together with us, we can be better than we are on our own. And so one of the things that can help us on this journey to chastity is having accountability partner. And it's part of why Steve and Holly wanted to do this with our D groups this year. Was last year after we did the chastity course, some of the guys were like, I'd love to continue to do something to continue to grow in this way. And we were like, well, what's the best way to do it? And the reality is, it was the discipleship groups, that this is a place that you guys can get together and have these conversations. And I think Steve will say this too. I remember he made a comment to me one time that one guy in his group had the courage to be vulnerable about his struggle with sexual sin. And in the group, instead of just kind of being very kind of surfacey in what they talked about, the depth of the group grew deeper because one guy was willing to lead and be vulnerable and open himself up to the challenge. And so with that, whether you're in a D group or you have a single person that you have as an accountability partner, what is the best thing to do? Well, my recommendation is not to focus just on what you don't want to do. Of course, we don't want to sin. But what I recommend doing with your accountability partner is focusing on what your plan is to build yourself up to not sin. Okay. So some of the just the basic things that help us to live holy lives: praying every day, having a devotion to the Blessed Mother, adoration, mass, confession. Those are all just great habits to go through with your accountability partners or your D groups so that you have what I call a process plan. And then finally, on page 17, to just pull it all together, there's a tool, it's called the 3-circle exercise. And what you'll see there is the target with the circle in the middle, the yellow ring, and then the green ring. And what this is this is a good way to tangibly put all of this together. Is that in that red circle in the middle, and I color it red to think of a stop sign. This is what I want to stop doing. Okay, whatever area that you might struggle with sin in, you want to stop that. And those are some of the common ones there. But then in the yellow ring, we want to put those things that are a near occasion of sin. What are the things that if I do this leads me to be tempted? Because as we learn to manage temptations, It's kind of like building the structure, a frame of a house around us to protect us from those things that come into us through our senses. And so once you're in a house, the only thing that gets in is what you allow through the windows or doors, right? And you have control now what comes in through your senses. Okay. And even better if you put in a fence and you have even a little bit more of a barrier there, right? That's what this yellow ring is. What are the things in my life that I need to be careful of, that I evaluate, hey, I might be at risk of falling into sin if I do these things. And then finally, the green ring are the things that keep me strong. Prayer every day, frequent sacraments, good friendships with people, learning my faith, growing and being the best person I can be. Those are all things that help us to stay strong. And so on page 18, there's a place there where you can create your own 3-circle plan. All right. Any questions? Otherwise, we'll break here.